What is the best way to improve cognitive function? Scientists have discovered a fascinating way to improve your memory and focus, and in this video I'm going to show you how. What if you could unlock focus, cognitive performance, memory, and not have those senior moments? What is the best way to improve cognitive function? Your brain is aging faster than you think unless you do this one thing. Forget brain games. This one method rewires your brain for peak performance. Scientists have discovered exciting new ways to unlock memory and focus. Why isn't anyone talking about this? So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what I've learned in working with thousands of patients and working on my own little brain that has helped me unlock greater levels of creativity, greater levels of focus. I've been able to read and write in ways I've never imagined and learn things quicker than ever imagined before. So stick around and I'm going to give you the secrets that I've shared with many people in the past. The brain is very interesting because if you break up your memory into 4 quadrants, what you're going to find is that you have this executive capability that no other mammal on the planet has. Our brains evolved an incredible amount over the course of about 250,000 years. And if you start tracing the patterns of the brain, we say, what makes us different and what makes us unique? So quadrant number 1 is recognizing that you've got this executive function in your brain. Quadrant number 2 is recognizing that you have gas, which is the cognitive function, and you also have a braking system. And the braking system is what's called your amygdala, and that's your fight or flight or your stress response. So do me a favor and try to learn something new when you're stressed. It doesn't really work. I remember a client of mine who came in and she had a traumatic brain injury and she was so articulate before the injury, and after the injury she could barely string a sentence together. She was devastated because her entire life's work depended on her ability to be able to speak and present and to interview people on her very popular radio show. So what we realized is that once we're able to align her amygdala with her prefrontal cortex, or the cognitive function, and break her free from that fight or flight response, she was able to articulate again, she was able to connect with her audience, and she was able to regain her emotional state. Because this is the other 2 quadrants that we're going to talk about, and I think they're the most important thing that most people overlook when they're accessing this unique thing that humans have called cognitive function or behavioral performance. And the 3rd quadrant, what you're going to find is that your emotional intelligence is a big piece of this. And then in this 4th, that's where we're going to call it your learning and your brain's ability to take in new information. So how do we access all 4 quadrants? How do we access your executive function or your ability to strategically think and to put things into motion? How do we get your brain where you can learn faster and be excited about new things? How can we access the emotions? Because emotions can override your brain's ability to think critically, but more importantly, they can also override your executive function, so it's really hard to take action in life. And then the final piece is, what can you do to downregulate that voice in your head that tells you to be stressed and tells you to be afraid? And that's what we're going to cover in this video today. So the first thing that we've unwrapped is this capability of using unique protein structures called peptides. So if you think about how the brain is networked, you have all these neurotransmitters going on. You have trillions of neurons, and these neurons, when they fire, they create this nice little synaptic message, and that's how we form memories. And if you can reinforce those synaptic clefts, or these synapses, that's when you can start getting new patterns and new behaviors. And what I've realized in the thousands of clients that I've worked with is that just by using these small molecules called peptides, you can activate those synapses in brand new ways. So the first peptide that researchers looked at is this peptide called dihexa. And dihexa has been studied for patients who have Parkinson's disease where there's a loss of dopamine. And dopamine is that neurotransmitter that allows us to have the reward when we do something that we find meaningful or valuable. The reason why dihexa is important is because it allows your brain to access what's called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotropic factors. And BDNF is what we've realized is that central component for you to regain that reward system. So have you ever felt this lack of accomplishment or lack of meaning or lack of reward, even though you've been working really hard on a project? In working with entrepreneurs, I find that no matter what level of success you may be at, there's a ceiling that happens because you overexpress dopamine. And when you overexpress dopamine, that's where a dopamine detox becomes very important. So the first lesson that I learned in accessing the brain health is that you've got to do a complete dopamine reset. And dihexa is the way that you can actually start expressing BDNF, because BDNF is what allows your brain to transform and grow. And without BDNF, you get overexpression of dopamine, and then you lose that reward system. Think of somebody who has addiction. And addiction, they're looking for connection so that they can get some dopamine. They get their reward system. And in some cases, that reward system can be very detrimental to your future. And this is why the dopamine detox is so critical. When you're on social media, you're scrolling through lots of different videos and looking for stimulation, and you're looking for the dopamine hit. And that's where Instagram, TikTok, all these platforms, they want you on their platform, and they want you, I hate to use the word, but they want you addicted to it. They want you to consume as much as you can possibly consume. But the real way to have your power back when it comes to your brain in this dopamine detox is the first thing you've got to do is not be a consumer of that information. So you can be a consumer or you can be a producer. You can be somebody who is reactive and everything gets thrown at you and you react to whatever is going on in the news or whatever the newest, latest, greatest thing is. Or you can be someone who's creative. And reactive and creative, same letters, reorganized. And when you access that creative side, then in the morning when you do your dopamine detox, the first thing is 15 minutes, no phone, just silence. Just get in your body, breathe. And just by breathing, that is one of the best ways that you can calm down your central nervous system. And that's where you can access this greater level of consciousness. And that consciousness and that dopamine detox is dependent on you connecting in with what your deeper meaning is in life, what the source is. And then after you've done that 15-minute of stillness, that's where you can add in dihexa. And dihexa is a phenomenal peptide. You can use it on your neck. You can also take it orally, but not all dihexa is created equally. That's where you want to use these formulas that come from compounding pharmacies. Make sure that you talk to your doctor about this. But it's one of the fastest ways that you can start improving your performance without suffering from a lot of the downsides of some medications like Adderall or Ritalin or Vyvanse. There's natural ways of doing this, but it starts with you changing your identity and saying, okay, I'm going to actually be a creative human who's expressing themselves because you are still. You're not consuming anymore, you're now manifesting, you're now creating. So one of the big secrets that I've learned about brain health is this unique area of medicine and a unique area in your body called stem cells. And many people, they say, oh, stem cells, it's unproven, or I'm scared of them. And I'm gonna show you how I overcame that same fear and skepticism that I had and show you how I actually changed my brain, and it's never been better. So I grew up on a cattle ranch in Idaho. I had a lot of activities that were adrenaline fueled. So I used to race dirt bikes, I'd play football. Anything that gave me a little bit of a buzz, I did it. And in some cases, these concussions, it led to what now I understand was ADHD. So I was the kid in the class that got paddled and the teachers were like, you're so disruptive. But I could learn really quick and I was very sharp as a kid, but I started to realize my brain was getting the best of me. My brain wouldn't allow me to sit still long enough to where I could really learn deeply. And this led to a lot of times where I would be in school when I was at the University of Utah. I was taking my pre-medicine courses. I got to the place where I just couldn't really concentrate. So I had to record the videos and then I'd listen to them at night when my brain was a little more calm. Yeah, I don't know if you've been like that, where you've been so distracted with all these moving parts in your life and your business that you never get anything done. It's kind of like a two-ring circus, or a three-ring circus in my case. One of the things I dove into is I started looking at peptides for cognitive performance, like we've talked about dihexa. And then I was in this stem cell conference and I learned about this novel way of treating the brain. Now, we'd had a lot of clients come into our office over the last 14 years, and they've come for conditions like dementia and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and cognitive decline. And we saw some really good turnarounds as far as their brain performance goes. Nothing that we could cure or fix, but we actually saw an improvement. But the hardest thing was getting stem cells through the blood-brain barrier. And I learned this technique from Arnold Kaplan. He's one of the leading researchers in stem cell therapy. And what he said is, he's like, we've understood now that the way to access the brain and to bypass the blood-brain barrier is through intranasal stem cells. And so I was fascinated because they saw an image where there's a brain and they did intranasal stem cells. They tagged these with these radioactive isotopes. You could trace where the stem cells landed in these patients, and it would go right to the area where they'd had trauma or injuries. And I said, I wonder if this will help my brain. And so after this presentation, I got a selfie with Arnold Kaplan and I said, what device are you using? How many stem cells? And I got the download of the entire treatment protocol, and I immediately went back to my office and I grabbed one of my doctors and I said, can you please do this treatment for me? Get the sphenocath and let's do the intranasal stem cells. And he did it reluctantly, but we realized, okay, there's some challenges to it, but we overcame those challenges. And I went to bed that night after having the treatment and I slept 11 hours. And I woke up the next morning and I could hear birds chirping. And I don't know about you, but when birds are chirping, it was a sign of ease. And even from an evolutionary perspective, the reason why chirping birds is a great way to calm your mind and boost your cognitive performance is because that's what would happen in the jungles. We would know that if there's no birds chirping, you're in threat. When I heard that, and I'm usually a 6.5 to 7.5 hour sleeper, this time I woke up and it was like all the thoughts and all the memories had been organized and categorized. It was like, you know, when your desktop gets too full and you just have to clean it all up. That's exactly how my brain felt. And from that moment forward, I could sit down and read a book again. I could write. I started writing books. I've written several books now, writing more all the time. I was able to articulate. I was able to create this medical group called Go Wellness. And we have trained hundreds, if not thousands of doctors through our training. This would not have happened if I didn't learn how to access these parts of the brain. What we've learned is those disruptive patterns from inflammation in the brain, you start disrupting the signals. And so that's where you don't get the proper reset on the dopamine receptors. And so it makes it harder to concentrate and harder to focus. But once I did a detoxification from my brain with these intranasal perinatal tissue stem cells, I just had a whole world open up to me. And fast forward, you know, it's been over a decade and there's been hundreds of patients who've come in, and our medical team has done phenomenal work in accessing these deeper parts of the brain with these intranasal therapies. And we actually had a patient of mine who came to me and he said, man, my brain always feels like a waterfall. It's just like never stops. And I've always got great ideas, and he is someone who started multiple businesses and he's had very big businesses, and luckily he was able to exit at a very high amount. But he said, for 20 years, I've tried to find doctors to work on my brain, and I've never had the same results in the last 2 months of working with your team as I had in the last 20 years. My brain is now to the point where I can focus on one thing at a time and I can finish projects. My house is cleaner now. My office, I feel more organized. My wife says I'm happier. My kids can stand being around me because I'm not constantly distracted. I don't get triggered when my phone notifications go off. I don't feel like I need to be stuck on the news. And these are all things that can happen just by rejuvenating your brain. While stem cells are powerful and your brain needs these stem cells to rejuvenate itself continually, there's another secret that I learned in understanding how the brain can be maximized and how you can have better focus and better memory. And this is what scientists have called nootropics. And nootropics, some people also call these smart drugs, because what nootropics do is they help create more emotional resilience. So they can help us perform better when there's pressure on us. The nootropics also help create more neuroplasticity, so they actually fuel the brain and feed the brain in a way that doesn't take away from another part of the brain. The nootropics have a very low side effect profile, and nootropics, one of the other categories of them, is they are continually expressive with the neurotransmitters in a rejuvenating way. And so there's a scientist named Dr. Guardier in Eastern Europe, and he was working with a lot of the athletes. So Dr. Guardier realized if we could capture the mind of these athletes, that's where we can really help them excel. And he also understood the damages of using stimulants like methamphetamines, for example. And while you'll get some temporary boost in cognitive performance, he recognized that it had some downstream side effects. And so anything that we do for the brain health, we want to look at your 10-year roadmap. And we want to say, okay, well, in this roadmap, what is it going to take for your brain to be healthier in 10 years from now than it is today? And so nootropics are a way that you can start understanding the fuel that you can give your brain. So certain nootropics that you may be aware of is like lion's mane. If you go in the forest and you see this beautiful mushroom that looks like a brain, there's a good chance that that's lion's mane. By the way, don't just eat random mushrooms in the forest. Don't recommend it. But lion's mane, they call it the lobster of the forest. And I remember the first time that we were harvesting lion's mane, and one of my herbal teachers, we found it, we cut it up, and we just put a little butter in a frying pan and just kind of seared it. And it is delicious. But one of the things lion's mane does is it helps activate acetylcholine pathways. And acetylcholine is how you get long-term memory. It helps replenish dopamine. It's great for serotonin reserves. And the most important thing about lion's mane is it's protective for your brain. So it prevents your brain getting in this rutted system. I don't know if you've ever just thought about something over and over and over again, maybe a conversation you had with your spouse, or this kind of emotional moment of the day, and you're like, why am I still thinking about this? And it's 3 a.m. Well, there's a good chance you could use some lion's mane. But nootropics is a whole category. There's nootropics that are called the Racetam family. And the racetams, like aniracetam, piracetam, these are very powerful, so you want to make sure that it comes from a compounding pharmacy. But they've been shown in many cases to be incredibly neuroprotective. So that means they protect your brain. They also help with memory, help with focus. I like aniracetam on days where I need to be on my game. If I'm going to speak with a big group, I want to make sure that I'm fully there and I'm not distracted by things, and aniracetam helps you get there. There's other nootropics too. One of the most popular nootropics that 95% of the population uses, which is caffeine. And caffeine in the form of coffee has a lot of beneficial properties to it. And caffeine, while it can be a stimulant, you can have a come down from it, which is the thing that we don't want. So if you add L-theanine, maybe 100 milligrams of L-theanine, then what happens is you're not getting the brakes. So anytime you push on the gas, your biology is pushing on the brakes. And so caffeine becomes one of the most important ways that you can think of a nootropic, because it's an antioxidant. It also has been shown people who drink more caffeine, or more coffee, not just caffeine, but more coffee, tend to be happier. They tend to have better cognitive function later on in life. But those of you who drink caffeine, make sure that if you're a fast metabolizer, you don't have to be quite as rigid, but just make sure you stop drinking caffeine at about 10 or maybe noon, so that it doesn't impact your sleep. And if you find that you need coffee, that's probably the worst time to have coffee. So if I have a poor night's sleep, I'm not going for coffee, because I know that that's going to overburden my brain, because it didn't get the chance to get the detoxification in my lymphatic system that I get with sleep. So these three ways, understanding peptides, we talked about dihexa, understanding how stem cells can rejuvenate the brain, repair damage, and then the use of nootropics can literally take your brain from being a mediocre performing brain to a high performing brain, one that you never thought you could access in a very short period of time. So for those of you who want to go deeper in this, I've given you an access to a copy of my book, The Peptide Blueprint, where I outline all of the nootropics and the things that you can do to maximize your brain, your physical performance, and an entire body rejuvenation system. So you can pick it up at agelessfuture.com.